welcome for Andy Schwab.
Thank you. Well, good morning, good afternoon, no, still good morning. So yeah, I graduated in 1984, so that was quite a few years ago. And when, the reason I got to mix software and hardware together, by the way, the computer science side of the equation was kind of in the sciences. They weren't real engineers at the time. So the only way I could get software stuff was my junior year, UCF switched from a quarter catalog to a semester catalog. And in doing so, I had a bunch of gaps in my program in order to graduate, so I got to take a bunch of software classes. You all take that for granted today in a computer engineering program. But I realized early on that you can't have one without the other. They're both kind of needed to actually accomplish cool things. I was born a nerd. I've been a nerd all my life. I'm engineer by DNA is what I tell people. And so I've had the opportunities to learn and grow and continually educate myself on technologies. As everybody understands that your learning doesn't stop when you leave here and go into the real world. You've got to have a passion around it and want to understand, to make a difference, to make a change, make this place a better place. And to do that, I'm constantly consuming information to stay abreast, to understand what's going on, reading, staying engaged with friends at the universities and research departments, things like that. So it's a lifelong learning role that we're going to be playing. So each one of you, I would plant that seed in your head that when you graduate from UCF here and go out into the world and try and make a difference, your goal is to continue to learn and grow as an engineer, as a software developer, as a technical technology expert. Never stops, because as everybody understands, and we'll talk a little bit about that in my talk today, how much the world is changing and why that's impactful and why that's important and an opportunity for us ahead of us. So I envy you all, because you all are starting on some great paths here. And technology has an opportunity to really transform the world around us. And so you all are the stewards of that, and it will have an opportunity to have huge impacts. So, as Tim mentioned, one of the things that I learned along the path to get where I am today is that we're all doing things for a reason. We're not just creating the best technology possible, but we're trying to move the needle. We're trying to drive for, me at Disney, it was improving the guest experience. At NASCAR, it's making the cars safer, or making them, the competition better, or making the fan more engaged. Those are all the goals I have. I leverage technology to make those things happen. So I encourage you, wherever you go, whatever career path you head down, is to understand what it is you're trying to accomplish, and then apply the skills that you've been given here at UCF toward those end goals. So those are some of the things we'll talk about. And the way I've structured my talk this morning is really, I'm going to give you some tenets, some things, some ground-based things that you should walk away with an understanding. So when you get out into the workplace, you apply them. Then I'm going to show you how I apply those principles to innovate at NASCAR specifically. And if you have questions along the way, feel free. We'll have opportunities to talk. So the buzzword of today is innovation, right? That innovation series we have here. I often think sometimes words like that are overused, because it's used all too often. It dilutes the value of it. Can I just ask a question? Raise your hand if you have a definition for the word innovation. Love to hear it. Yeah.
Well, it's using already available technologies in a new way to get a better result.
So using available technologies, maybe in a whole new concept, to create new opportunities, right? That, just paraphrasing a little bit. Is that right? Agreed, right? That is one way to innovate.
New ideas.
New ideas. So brand new ideas, solving a problem from a whole new angle, maybe is another way to say that. I think that's also a good definition. So the key to know about innovation, so both of those are really good definitions, is that there's actually a process. There's a way you can think about things and attack a situation to create innovation opportunities. Innovation isn't just somebody sitting around, a big light bulb lights above their head, and they come up with a new idea, and wow, I've invented something new and we've innovated. It isn't the way it really works in the real world. You've got to apply basic principles. So think about some of the engineering basic classes you've taken. There's your step-by-step things that you follow through, and you will have successful outcomes every single time. Just give you a little bit of background about myself, and Tim gave you a little bit of highlight. I started my career, I left UCF and started at Kennedy Space Center working for McDonnell Douglas. I worked there over 10 years. I ended up leading several of the labs that were innovating in the space of space science. I left there, worked for Lockheed Martin for several years, figured out ways to make missiles blow up better. And then I went on to Disney and invented, I have patents around FastPass, PhotoPass, and a lot of the really innovative things that drove guest experience things at Disney. And now I'm at NASCAR and I'm trying to innovate in that space there. But it's a way of thinking and it's a process, and it's all the skills that I learned in my undergraduate years applied to help kind of give me a good foundation. But it's really the shift in thinking and my understanding of what I am trying to accomplish and then applying those skills to it. So they're just trying to give you some of the way to think about it. So innovation, that's why we're here. And really, it is the engine which will help a company grow. Your job, anywhere you work, is to try and help your company grow, right? The goal is successful business. The successful business can survive. That successful business can have an impact on the social, the environment, on innovating product, whatever. But your job is to help your company grow. And you're the engine for that. I believe technology has the biggest impact anywhere on anything in any company. It is pervasive across every part of every business today. Technology, specifically an engineering discipline, is going to be there to drive it. And to prove that, I'll give you just some interesting statistics that I was reading about recently. And terms you guys all know, 5 exabytes, that's a lot, right? If you looked at from 0 to 2003, the known history of mankind, and you digitize it, you would have created 5 exabytes of data, right? Information. So, okay, that's a data point. Next data point is, in the years 2003 to 2010, we created 5 exabytes every 2 days, right? So the amount of information we're generating, the way we're digitizing and using it. So these are just things put in the back of your mind. We'll talk about how that applies to you later. 2010, we're up to 912 exabytes. So look at the geometric progression that we're applying here. And by the way, 2012, we create 5 exabytes every 10 minutes. So the amount of data, the amount of information that we're creating and chomping and making available. Now, there's a hierarchy of data. There's data, there's information, knowledge, and wisdom. So there's lots of data out there, but we got to figure out ways to make wisdom out of it. But just a data point. Technology, right? Digitizing everything, the amount of information available is unbelievable. In fact, today a Maasai warrior out in the middle of the bush in Africa has more information at their fingertips than President Clinton had, period. So they have cell phones out there, and by the way, they do almost all their purchasing and transactions now with cell phones, with texting. So you go buy that goat out in the middle of Africa, or that blanket or clothing, use your cell phone today. Way more information at their fingerprints than Clinton. So just, again, another data point. Wow, the world's changing, it's changing rapidly, and it's going to have a real impact on how we think about things. And it is our responsibility as those people with the knowledge and ability to make the change to make the world a better place. I believe technology can enhance the environment around us, enhance the world around us, and make life better for people. That is fundamentally a core belief I have. That is something I hold on to, and that every way I think about how technology can make the world a better place, I try and apply it and drive forward with it. So when you think about innovation, there's another word out there that people often use, and that's called revolution. And Muhammad al-Aryan, during the Egyptian overthrow there, was talking about the revolution occurring there. Most revolutions are not discrete events. They are transformation ideas. They could take months and years. And by the way, that applies to innovation, right? So now I'm giving you a little bit of a bent toward how I think about the word innovation and revolution are one and the same. So, I say at this point, Viva la Revolution, because it's all about you guys out there being able to innovate and drive forward and making change for the better, for your company, for the world, for people in general. Now, in order to innovate, though, I will tell you, and this is a practical application of how you drive innovation in a company. So these are things that you can take away, and when you go get your first jobs, have some of these tenets in the back of your mind. Is you've got to have a platform that's rock solid and base and capable. Because in a company, the real world situations are, I got to keep the lights on, I got to keep things running, I got to make sure my systems don't crash, et cetera, et cetera. If you're spending time dealing with that as a constant problem, you won't have the bandwidth, time, or resources to be able to innovate, to actually move the needle forward. So make sure wherever you are that you feel like you have a good solid base, that things are working soundly, you understand how things should be working together, and then you can kind of make your step forward. And I use the example of a pit stop. How many people actually have watched a NASCAR race or watched NASCAR in a regular? Wow, that's a surprise. Actually, I didn't know anything about NASCAR 2 years ago. But the most coordinated thing I've ever seen out there is a NASCAR pit stop. If you want to know if you want to use that as a metaphor for a smooth running company, a company that's able to then spend resources on innovation and making change, watch a NASCAR pit stop. And by the way, if you just talk about evolution, not 10 years ago, or maybe 15 years ago, a typical NASCAR pit stop took 45 seconds. Today, a NASCAR pit stop doing the exact same things takes 13.2 seconds or less. If they're really, really good, maybe 12.8. They're changing 4 tires, filling up the gas. They're jacking the car up, jacking the car down, cleaning the windshield, maybe making repairs and getting the car on its way. And by the way, the difference between a 20-second pit stop and a 13-second pit stop is about 10 car lengths by the time you get back on the track. So you've lost 10 places that you've got to earn back. So pit stops are critical. So I use this as a metaphor for a smooth running company. If you've got that working well and things are humming along, your opportunity for innovation is going to get there. So when you're first assigned, when you first get your jobs, you probably oftentimes, as the new kid on the block, aren't going to be working on the latest, coolest project. But you may be working on ways to get your environment better, more stable, and more reliable. And your contribution toward innovation is that you're going to make sure that the business is running smoothly, efficiently, and effectively so that you can apply your resources outward. And the other thing you got to remember is getting the right people together is innovation. Innovation doesn't ever happen in a vacuum. You've got to bring people together, you've got to have a seat at the table, and you've got to have good dialogue and make sure that you have the right perspectives across a company. Again, most companies have a lot of different perspectives. So let's take Disney, for example. There's creative perspective, there's business perspective, there's technology operations perspective, there's guest operations perspective, et cetera, that all need to be part of the thinking of the process of moving toward innovation. So you're a piece of the puzzle, and you've got to remember that. Again, as engineers, you're responsible for either product creation or design or build of a new thing. You might be part of the overall business perspective. So you've got to make sure that you build the relationships that keep you together talking about that. And this allows that transformation to occur. By having those people in place and talking amongst yourselves, you actually can allow innovation to occur. Another common way that the world thinks today in the business marketplace is about risk and risk avoidance. And this slide here is to help you think that maybe there's a different way of thinking. A common phrase that you'll hear in most of the places you go to work is, as an engineer or as a person who's delivering a service or capability, I want you to underpromise and overdeliver, right? Have you guys heard that term before? Is that a new, right, you've heard that term, underpromise and overdeliver. That's the engineering mantra, right? We're trained not to take risk because that would be bad, I'll get yelled at. Well, I used to tell my innovation groups that have working for me is that's wrong. And the reason I believe that's wrong, and it's not wrong in all cases, let me be very specific so I don't get any of the professors mad at me, but it's wrong because what you'll do is if you're here and you underpromise and overdeliver, you'll get here, right? You've taken that very safe step, you've not stuck your neck out, you've not actually allowed yourself to take risks. I say overpromise, overdeliver, right? That scares the hell out of most of the people that I work with. And the reason for that is I believe if you step out here, that you're putting yourself at risk, that you have the opportunity to innovate and make dramatic change, not incremental steps. And in order to have that opportunity, you've got to be willing to take those risks. You've got to step out. So you want to overpromise and overdeliver. Now, the overdeliver part is important of that equation because if you underdeliver there, then you can cause real problems. But again, we're taught as engineers that we have conservative safety risk margins in place in all our designs. Those are all good principles. But there are times when you've got to, in order to move the needle far enough forward, you've got to be willing to take a little bit of risk. And that can only happen if you have the right culture in the company, you have the right risk profiles, that you have the right leadership support in order to do that. But I will tell you, that is the only way companies actually move the needle forward. They'll never, ever move the needle forward in a dramatic way and have an impact that's disruptive by taking incremental baby steps and just evolving slowly along the way. Now, some companies that may be appropriate for, but if you really want to be that innovator, that person sticking out, you've got to be optimistic, you've got to be willing to take the risks and know when to apply those risks. So I realize there'll probably be some dialogue in some of your engineering classes about how that may be even blasphemy, but I'll tell you, that works. The other thing that you'll also learn when you get out in the working place is you've got to have people dedicated to doing this. you'll find, and again, I talked about it earlier, is if your job is basically to keep the lights on, and you've also been told to innovate, right? This often happens. I hear companies say this all the time, is everybody's in charge of innovation at my company. Well, then I would say no one is, because everybody's worried about just keeping the lights on and running, because that's what they get yelled at for. They're not going to get yelled at for not innovating. You've actually got to dedicate resources. People need to be pulled aside and allowed to focus on that and their goals. And you're measured on the ability to actually bring new concepts in and pilot them and move them forward. So, I encourage you, if that's an ilk you have, look for those opportunities, because I often think that sometimes bringing in fresh minds right from the universities are good to be part of a program like that, because they're unencumbered by the previous learnings, right? We've always done it this way. This is the way we do things. We can't possibly do it any differently. Oftentimes, fresh minds like you guys can come into an innovation organization and I say it's unencumbered by knowledge, right? You don't know that you can't do it this way, so you're going to go and use your basic skills and think about it maybe in a new way. So look for those opportunities, because I really find that's an exciting place to be at times. So dedicated resources need to be there. And when you're in that role, you've got to have the curiosity and mindset to want to kind of scan the marketplace. I find that when I build programs like that within companies, I link up with universities like UCF. I link up with research departments of companies. I look at the marketplace. I'm constantly reading, as I mentioned earlier, to understand what that marketplace can do for you and where the world is changing and evolving to. I worked with Kodak early on when I was at Disney, and they actually believed digital photography wasn't going to be a big thing, and that the film was a better solution than digital photography. How many people actually have a film camera here today? Yeah. Oh, you have one, okay. Because you're probably a photography buff in the background, right? The world changed around them because they believed that film was the better answer, and how many of you know what's happened to Kodak, really? I mean, they're a non-existent company today because they were afraid to change. They believed that their path was right. So you've got to be looking for those disruptive opportunities out there, and hopefully you find a field that you're working in that you have the passion around. That's just what you do on a regular basis. I mean, I'm constantly reading and learning every single day and scanning the marketplace out there. But in order to be really effective on that scanning process, you've got to have some key focus areas. And when you get into your company, depending on what it is, you want to pick three to five areas that you really want to go deep in on. And you want to be able to understand exactly what it is can have what I call a broad horizontal impact to your company. So at Disney, mobile computing, wireless technologies, big data, things like that were the things we focused on. Thank you very much. At NASCAR, we focus on social media, competition technologies, things like that are core capabilities that we want to be able to grow into. When you get into your company, understand what those 3 to 5 things are that you want to be able to go deep on, and then take your time personally to learn about those are the things that can have what I call broad horizontal impact. So here's an example for NASCAR. We track our cars. We actually get 2 centimeters of accuracy on the cars going around the tracks 200 miles an hour. I can tell you exactly where that car is. They have accelerometers and inertial measurement units on board along with GPS. So we have tracking technologies. We do inspection technologies, streaming media, content things. So all the broadcasts we do at NASCAR, the 17 of the largest events in the country are NASCAR events. We have more media than a Super Bowl every single weekend. Social media technologies, ways to connect with their fans in new ways, areas I'm focusing in on. And then for me, the other one is infrastructure. So when you're out in Talladega or out in the middle of nowhere, you can't do hardly anything unless you have a good connection, fiber in the track, and the ability to communicate through mobile devices. So that's an area we're focusing a lot of energy around. And then one of the last few tenets are a clear strategy. You understand exactly what it is your company's trying to accomplish. So think about, from a strategic perspective, if you're out there, you're going to build product, you're going to help build capabilities or services, whatever that is, you want to make sure that you understand how that's impacting the overall strategy, where that's going. Because that'll help you make decisions about how you tackle the problem, and maybe even look beyond what the current requirements are, where you think we might end up going. Always find the best technical people that I can have on my teams are people who are thinking beyond what they're just asked to go do today. So they're thinking about, well, gosh, if we deliver this capability, and I know that we want to have the best customer service, or we want to have great guest returns at Disney, I'm going to think about it maybe in a different way to solve the problem you have immediately so that we can get to the next place. And those of you in the room that are engineering-minded people, That's the real value you can bring to the table. It isn't just delivering what I asked you to do, but being able to think about what I might be asking you to go do next, and you design along the way to get us there. So understanding the strategy where we're going. And making sure that strategy is holistic in nature. So oftentimes companies have singular strategies within each individual vertical of that company. Again, I'll use Disney as an example. You've got hotel operations, you got merchandise, you got food and beverage, you got park operations, you got all these different parts. A good holistic strategy encompasses all of those, including technology and creativity, that's the Disney side, and allows you to think holistically around a single strategy, but you look at it from different angles. So the technical people will look at this strategy this way, the operations people will look at it this way, the creative people, et cetera. So be a part of that strategy, understand what that strategy is, ask the question when you get to your company, what is our business strategy and how does technology play or engineering play a role in that? So I'll just go the example here at NASCAR. It's all about our media competition, the technology platforms, and then our partners, broadcast partners, are the 4 key elements that I make sure are all tied together when we develop a strategy. The other part about innovation and building things you got to understand is that it's an iterative process. You understand, create, evaluate, and go back and close that loop again. And it's a constant evolution. One of the things when I told you dedicated resources about, around innovation, the job of those folks not only is to come up with the great new ideas, but it's also say what you shouldn't be working on. Because there's often times where there are red herrings out there, paths that you might head down, technologies you might invest in, that really are just short-term value things. Look for the next leap. Don't get distracted. And often, another quote that I've used in the past is, don't let a bunch of good ideas get in the way of a great idea. Because you can often find yourself squirreled away in solving a bunch of little cool things where you're missing the opportunity, resources, time, or focus to do that one great idea. And then leadership support. Make sure wherever you are that if you're going to drive innovation and change, that you have top-down leadership support, because oftentimes you'll get resistance from the people who are used to doing things the old way. You're the young gun up here, the new kid doesn't know anything, what the hell do you know? You've got to make sure you got the support in order to be able to get things to move forward. You're going to be the fresh minds out there helping drive change and transformation within a company. And then also know that innovation and the transformation of a company like this takes time. And you need to make sure that that's understood by your company as well. This innovation process chart here really is just about when to involve people. I often find it works best when you have a small group of people dedicated to kind of iterate around a ton of good ideas, and you don't start bringing in the number of people, which this axis here is the number of people, until you're really ready to implement. Because what you'll find also, especially as the new kids on the block, is when you come into companies, people have done things a certain way for a long time. This is the way you do it. This is why it is this way. We'll tell you all the reasons that all these great ideas might not work. So oftentimes, if you get the appropriate leadership support, you can operate, in an innovation space, and then bring people in slowly as you go to get them inculcated to what that project looks like and how it can transform a company, a business, or service, whatever that might be. So let's talk a little bit about NASCAR. So I saw a lot of hands actually watch a little bit of NASCAR here. I don't know if you know some of these things here, but equivalent to Super Bowl every weekend. I think I mentioned that 1,800 workers travel with the race teams, and sometimes we're the largest city in a state when we show up. So like when we go to Bristol, suddenly Bristol is now the largest city in that state when NASCAR's there. We have a bunch of national series, regional series, local series, and 2 internationals. We have tracks all over the country. We have offices all over the United States. And there's a little video I want to show you real quick that is just a day in the life at NASCAR when we go and set up technology. And it should have, it didn't have any audio, so I'll narrate as we go here. So 17 of the 20 largest sporting events are NASCAR events. I bet you guys didn't know that. 120,000 people typically come to a NASCAR race. Sometimes it's up to 250, 300,000, Daytona 500. So we actually, I have 14 semi-trucks full of technology to go from race to race to race. We have our data centers, our production facilities, everything is done at track, and they're all on semi-trucks. And we set up on Wednesday afternoon, Thursday, and tear down on Sunday and go to the next track across the country. So again, it's an amazing, amazing setup. I remember when I first went to my first NASCAR race, my jaw, I just couldn't believe all that went on. Today they use very mechanical ways of measuring the car. We'll talk about how we're innovating in that space this year. One of the biggest problems we have is when you have that many people at a racetrack, you can't even use your cell phones. Even though they may have coverage, there's capacity issues associated with that. Most cell systems aren't designed to handle 220,000 people in a small 2.5 mile area, so they all tend to break down. So we're solving that too by working with companies like Qualcomm, Sprint, Verizon, AT&T, and T-Mobile are putting in new systems at all these tracks so you can actually, because I mean you guys expect to go, you're going to check your Facebook, you're going to check in, you're going to Twitter, you're going to use all these other social media type tools. We kind of do that everywhere you go today. You'd expect to do that in a NASCAR race. Today you can't, but we're solving that. This is one of the production facilities. That's our race control where they're watching the races. Up until 5 years ago, there were 43 people in a room with a little red button. Every time a car crossed the track, they'd hit the red button. That was how they scored the race. And that was only 5 years ago. Now we have transponders on the cars, and they're actually counting the cars through computer systems. So that's just a little bit about a setup at NASCAR. So again, as I mentioned, they set up on Wednesday night, Thursday morning, and then they tear down on Sunday afternoon, and they pack it all up into a truck. We roll out about 25 miles with a fiber optic cable at each track, and then roll that all back up and take it to the next track and roll it back out again. So it's an interesting setup. So once I get better infrastructure in that place, hopefully I'll start moving less trucks. So inspection, we talked about one of the areas there, one of the 5 focus areas. This year we use this mechanical thing that sits on top of the cars. Next year, actually we're piloting this year, we have a laser platform. Car drives up, RFID reads off the car, pulls in data about that car itself, shoots 80 different lasers, does 3 different inspection points on the car, and can tell if the car is within compliance with the NASCAR rules, all done within microseconds. And before it was done very manually with mechanical measurement tools. It was prone to human variability associated with that, and there was not a digital record of the car at the end of the inspection. Now there is. So one area we're innovating against mobile computing. We're measuring. We have black boxes in all the cars. We make sure that we understand all the crash details associated with any wrecks. We pull that information in. All the OEMs get all that information from us. We actually have the most information around safety and crash information and survivability in a car. And all the OEMs, we give that away free to them to use to help design better and more safer cars. So NASCAR is one of the biggest drivers to driving safety within cars. Mobile computing, a lot of work in that space today. They use a little card in the hip pocket of the officials. Next year they'll be walking around with mobile devices to check out what happens in the pit spots. The rule book now is fully digital. It's available on iPads, iPhones, Blackberries, Android devices. That was our credentialing. The biggest thing that I think is really interesting is how we're leveraging again, knowing where the car is every 2 centimeters. We're trying to tell the story of NASCAR, getting people to understand what's happening out on the track. It's more than a bunch of cars just going left. So we put up, we have GPS in the cars, as I mentioned. We also have GPS on the cameras, so they know their field of view, so they can correlate the GPS location information with the car it's looking at and put those bubbles. So as the cars are going around, we can give you information about those cars. And again, it's about helping tell that story. Remember back about the strategy I talked about earlier. It's about knowing what it is I'm trying to accomplish. Well, I'm trying to help bring a broader audience into NASCAR. Well, in order to do that, you got to understand what's happening on the track. So I'm going to do that through technology by telling the story about what's happening out there. I'm going to use your mobile device that you bring to the racetrack. I'm going to let you pull up your iPad as you're watching it on TV at home, and you're going to get a bunch of more information to help see what's going on and drill down to things that might interest you. Well, I can only do that when I've solved the infrastructure problems, I've solved the car tracking problems, I understand how to stream media out. You know, all those 5 focus areas I talked about earlier, allowing me to do things like like you're seeing here that we're rolling out this year. A digital dashboard, we have computers on board. You know, I talked about the measurement. Now this is how you could compare pit stops between number 11 and number 48. He did it in 12.4 seconds, 13.3 seconds. Number 11 just gained 2 spots on the track by being out of the pits faster. And this allows comparisons of the winning lap speed or the current fastest lap speed to this particular driver's lap. You can select your driver on your iPad, say, I'm really interested in Danny Hamlin. How is he doing against this last guy? And this will give you the analytics because I'm pulling in so much data about those cars and every single car, and I can let you understand what's happening and how they're driving in comparison. Just some more of that. We have devices now that you can have at the tracks. You can rent these. Gives you 10 different video feeds, seeing the cars from all different angles, get all the data feeds coming out of the cars itself. This is really just a stopgap until I solve the cell phone problems at the tracks, and there's a higher penetration of smart devices for our fan base. But you'll be able to get all that kind of on your mobile device in the next year or two. So here's an example of that. Large displays, again, telling the story. Remember, the thing I have stuck in my head is how do I tell the story what's happening in NASCAR? So while you're at the track, maybe you don't have a device, I'll put large displays up there and then give you really interesting information about what's happening at the track itself, helping you see what's inside. The other area that we're really innovating in, we're turning this live next week, is a social media command center. It's actually a media command center. It's sucking in all the information in the world about Facebook, Twitter, local news media, print media, et cetera, audio, and analyzing it and understanding the tone of what's happening, what they're talking about, you know, as it relates to NASCAR, so that we can be proactive in the space when news stories come around, when, you know, the world starts talking about Dale Jr. has a concussion, what is the impact to that? We can do analytics on that, understand, and get out and be proactive in communication and helping transform the way people think about the sport, understand what's happening, and have accurate information about what's going on out there. So this technology here is one of those big data things you hear a lot about. And we're able to do analytics on it to understand and then react to it in a positive way. Again, one of the 5 focus areas I talked about, and I've only been there 2 years, and we've been able to make some pretty significant impacts. Here's a fantasy game, so live fantasy. While the cars are racing around, you're actually able to get live data about the race itself. It's all coming from the cars directly through our pipes, and then you can play the fantasy game. Online racing, so you can test your skills against real drivers. Several of the drivers actually drive in this space. And one of my favorites is our new console games that we've released. Again, why are we doing this? We're trying to hit a younger audience and trying to broaden our fan base. So the NASCAR Racing Game 2011 actually took data that we collected from real races on real drivers and applied that toward the AI engines associated with each of the cars. So Kyle Busch, number 18 over there, the M&M's car, actually drives like Kyle Busch because on that track. So however he behaves in an aggressive fashion and takes the high line, whatever that is, he'll actually drive like that because we gave all that data to the company that built this. Next year, we'll be releasing games that allow you to download the last 10 laps of the 2010 Talladega race and put yourself in Jeff Gordon's car and see if you can't do better than Jeff did in that race. And then on the horizon, we're looking at how do you become the 44th car in a NASCAR race on your Xbox at home, racing for real, not this playing against each other kind of stuff, but you're on the track virtually and see how well you do in a real race. So again, using the infrastructure I invested in, the tracking car technology, the streaming media technologies, and our infrastructure that we've tried to really build out there, we're able to do really cool things like this. They're going to meet the goal, the strategic goal that my company has, which is to broaden our fan base, to reach out to more fans and to bring in a younger demographic. So that's what I have instilled in my head, and that's what we're off doing. So that's NASCAR and the technology around it. So, all right, went pretty quick there.
So now we subject you to a barrage of questions.
Sure, glad to.
And they already know I get the first set, right? So, Andy, as you were talking about, you said, hey, as engineers, you might get yelled at.
Yeah.
Right? And so you're a boss of engineers, and these guys are going to be your employees one day. So either why did you get yelled at as a new engineer, or why do you yell at your new engineers? So what do they need to avoid doing?
You know, I would say early on, I certainly had the pre-assumption, so that I would get yelled at if I took risks. And I will say that pushing the envelope, thinking outside the box, and not doing the status quo is what I think your job is as engineers. You've got to challenge thinking around things. You've got to have the right level of support, though. You know, before you go off and do something willy-nilly, you've got to make sure that that makes sense, because you may not have all the context and all the information around it. So when I yell at my engineers is when they're not taking risks, when they're not actually pushing the envelope. They're just delivering exactly. If I say I need a piece of software to do X, and they do just X, but there are obvious kind of implications to that, and they haven't thought about those things, that's when I yell at them. Okay. Right? Just because they deliver what I asked for isn't what I'm looking for. I'm looking for broader thinking. You guys are smart. That's why you're in engineering and computer sciences. Use your brains to figure out where you're going and help the company get to that point. I think that's when, I think that we are taught, and I don't know if that's maybe hopefully changed over time, that it's bad to take risks. I think, engineering principles, at least when I went to school, was all about conservativeness, building in safety margins. That's all good. That's all good engineering principles, right? You can't compromise on that. But think outside the box, look beyond what it is you're delivering against, and try and predict what it is you want to be at in the future along your design path, because there are design choices you can make along the way that give you those options, and there's design choices along the way that just meet the demand that it is right now.
Okay, so follow up just a little bit on that. And so they may not go work for the leader like you that says, hey, I just want you to go take risks. What would they have to do to maybe help get a different kind of leader to get that leadership support? Right? Show
them the opportunities, demonstrate the opportunities, take initiative on your own to say, I know you've asked me to build this, and here's what I've done it what you've asked, but have you thought about this? Present options and opportunities. Show your leaders that you're thinking beyond the immediate, and that you have a vision, that you understand what it is we're trying to accomplish, and that you want to help get us there. I think that you'll almost always get support.
So same thing you want your company to do, deliver the business, number one, and then over-deliver.
Yes, correct.
Okay. Questions?
You talked a lot about keeping the innovative mindset in your presentation, and then you talked about separating the great ideas from the good ideas. So, like, what kind of filter or like what kind of system do you use to say, hey, this is a good idea and this is a great idea? Is it part of like the mindset, keeping up with the market?
I think a little bit of that is experience. I think helps, but I would say it's easy to look at a good idea that has a marginal impact within a very narrow vertical. The great idea has a broad impact that can transform many aspects of your business, right? If you look at Apple and the iPhone when it was released in 2007, I guess, that has implications across their subscription model, their hardware model, their music model, their ability to sell content, getting people to buy more Mac computers because it linked up with a computer early on. It had a broad horizontal impact. A good idea might have been, hey, we should do iTunes, right? Which was a vertical thing that would allow me to sell content, and that was kind of within a vertical. Leveraging that in a way horizontally had a huge impact on the company, completely transformed Apple. So if you look at those kinds of examples, I would say good ideas are, yeah, they'll move the needle forward, but a great idea is going to have a broad impact across many different verticals within the company. I'd say is a good starting point.
Do you think that the innovation, these great ideas you're talking about, happen more easily in smaller companies?
No, I'd say that there's pluses and minuses to both. Smaller companies with the right leadership can be very agile and move quickly, but they have, by definition, typically fewer resources to apply to it and may be unable to take the risks necessary. Large companies have more bureaucracy, more pain, more resources, and are able to absorb risky ventures depending on their culture as well. To me, it's a lot about leadership. And I don't know, you can innovate in a small company, you can innovate in a large company, but it's about leadership, and you've got to have the right leadership and ability to move that needle, follow the tenets I laid out here, and you'll innovate. And I've done it both at NASCAR, which is a small company, and at Disney, which is a large company. Both can happen.
You say you have patents. Like, do you own those patents? You could royalties and everything?
So from the day I started as an engineer, and you go work for, whether it's McDonnell Douglas, Lockheed Martin, Disney, or other, you typically sign a little piece of paper that says every good idea that you ever have is ours right now. Thank you very much. And a lot of companies are that way. Maybe it's changing. Some companies allow you to say, well, if we decide not to patent this idea, you have the opportunity personally to do it, like if you present them, but you've got to give them first right of refusal. That's a lot of companies do that. But all my patents are either owned by Disney or by McDonnell Douglas or NASA, actually.
Well, do you regret that, or did you
No, not at all. I've had the opportunity to do some fabulous things. I had an impact. All I cared about was I had an impact. Right? People walk away, PhotoPass, FastPass, which takes a lot of pain out of the experience at a theme park. PhotoPass, which is typically rated as one of the highest guest experience things, people love that as a service. That's my satisfaction. I have a nice little Mickey statue with saying I have a patent on that. And they actually did give me a little bit of money at the time. But you know what? That's what I'm there for. That's why I got into engineering, was to make a difference. So I feel like I did that.
But we can also probably look you up, and we can see.
Yeah, you can
Right?
Google, do the patent search. You can see all the, legalese associated with all those patents. So but
You have an interesting work history. What motivated you to transition through all these different industries, and would you recommend that?
they sounded like fun. Work is about, for me, if I'm not having fun, if it's not a challenge, if I'm not going to grow as a person, that's what I look for is opportunities to learn. I believe, as an engineering or as a computer science, technical field, we are committed to learning something every single day. Excuse me, learn not to shake my water. It's all about learning for me. And so the Space Center was a great learning opportunity for me. I got to, for those of you Unix guys, I had source code walkthroughs from the guys who developed the first Unixes all the way through to helping. If anybody runs Linux, you probably have some of my code and some of the device drivers associated with X Windows. I got to play in those spaces. So I learned a ton technically at the Space Center. Lockheed Martin, I learned about manufacturing and how to automate and make things better there. At Disney, I did everything from the cruise line systems and making that guest experience better to FastPass, PhotoPass, and learning there. NASCAR, I didn't know anything about NASCAR. I've learned a ton. I'm solving infrastructure problems. So to me, it's about opportunities to learn, be challenged, to grow as a person. That's when I take new jobs.
You talked about crash data that you sent to the OEM.
Yeah.
When you look at NASCAR, there's kind of a limit to how fast the stock cars can actually go. Because
Yeah.
after a while, you all innovate with the spoiler splitters and all different technologies. What are you doing to kind of figure out what that limit is, just to make sure that your drivers don't go 300 miles an hour and start to fly away?
Well, yeah, so we know we have an R&D center up in Concord, which has some of the most sophisticated engineers on the planet around automotive design, wind tunnel testing, crash survivability testing, things like that. The biggest issue isn't the driver's safety, it's the fan's safety. So when you hit above 200 miles an hour and you wreck, your car can go airborne and it hits what's called the catch fence around it, and it shreds the metal, and pieces of that metal come flying into the stands. So for us, we're trying to keep the fans safe in a pragmatic way. So that's why we keep the mileage below 200 miles an hour. We also developed, working with the University of Kansas, the safer barrier, which is the wall around the racetracks, which absorbs a ton of the energy when a wreck happens, which then saves the driver as well. And so you see a ton of the wrecks that happen on a regular basis, and those guys getting out of those cars and walking away is pretty amazing. And that is sheer engineering skill right there. But it is about keeping people safe. And so we've learned that 200 miles an hour is really the threshold we can go there. Yes, sir.
You were talking about being informed and knowing stuff. Isn't there like a point where it's too much information overload?
Well, remember I said earlier you got data, information, knowledge, and wisdom. Yeah, you've got to be at a point where you are assimilating the information into wisdom or applicable knowledge. That's one way to answer the question. The other one is my slide on the 912 exabytes worth of information that we're, or 512 we're creating every 10 minutes now. It is up, I think that's the next big engineering challenge, is how to sift through that information and make knowledge out of it or wisdom out of it. So personally, I have Google filters and alerts on topics that I think are interesting. That's why I said create, your 3 to 5 focus areas, and that's where I spend most of my time reading. I do keep a broad breast of what's happening out in the marketplace, but I know mobile computing, I know, infrastructure advancements, I know, the areas that I'm focused in on really deeply, but I can't do everything, right? And medical advances, things like that are interesting, but I just can't assimilate all that. So there's kind of 2 answers to that. In the back there?
Do you ever think electric race cars are going to NASCAR?
Do I ever think electric race cars? Well, we've talked about it. And so imagine this, right? It's the day of the race. The master ceremony steps out and says, "Gentlemen, start your engines." It just falls flat right there. I think that you'll see different racing paradigms where electric may come into play. We're looking at several different things in that space. We are looking to make things more green. I drive a hybrid, by the way, out there. But from a visceral entertainment perspective, it's just not there today. Now, I did say, you guys all have smartphones, I assume. There's a great app. It's called Accelerate, XLR8. And my son, when he graduated from school, wanted a Mustang with a lot of loud pipes and stuff. And I bought him that app instead. And what it does is it uses the accelerometer on your phone, and as you accelerate, it plays the engine noise really loud, and you plug it into your stereo, and you can tell it, I want it to be a Mustang, I want it to be a Camaro, I want it to be a Corvette, and it makes it sound just like that. So we might do that on the electric cars, we'll see, so you get the same rumble.
So that might be a good solution for me too.
Get the Accelerate app, you mount it in your car, and then it uses the accelerometer to tell.
So I could drive my SUV like a sports car.
Yeah, even when you take corners, it squeals the tires and everything. It's great. It's the greatest app ever. It's good.
One more question? Yes.
Question from the professorial side here. So one of the things that I've noticed, right, being a newcomer to society here and so on, is that there's actually 2 trends in America. One is the serious trend, you learn the math, you learn how to prove things, you learn to take that very, very slow step. And that leads to technology, good engineers, and then there's the business side, which is the Mitt Romneys and so on, you look at the world and you can you take a risk, try something new. My question for you is, what do you see as the right way to make both those happen in students?
I think what's interesting is, I believe, we're looking at the world we're looking at the same problems in the same way, but from different angles. And one of the pieces of value that I bring, and one of the things that I wish I had done more of when I was in school, was to understand the other perspective better, the business side of the equation better as an engineer, because I will be a better engineer if I understand the business perspective. I also work hard to translate engineering concepts, principles, and guidelines to my business partners. That's one of the areas that I think I bring a ton of value, because if they can understand the challenges and limitations and things that we have to worry about as engineers better, then they can make better decisions. And working together is what then can actually move us forward in a very positive way. If you sit as the engineer who only speaks engineeringese and can only communicate amongst yourselves, you will be limited in value. Your value will be when you can apply that in terms and context that your partners who are driving the business or whatever it is you're doing forward can understand it and actually use that as valuable input moving forward. So you've got to work hard to understand their perspectives, and they will try and work hard to understand yours, but I will tell you it's easier for you to explain it in their terms than it is for them to be able to try and understand it in our terms. Trust me, I've been there, I've tried that. So, I take it, and I think where my successes come in my career is because I worked very hard in trying to understand how to communicate on business terms the engineering things that I think about every single day. And that will serve you well as students learning how to communicate in that, so that the conversations from the business side matter. You know where you're headed, you know what they're trying to accomplish, and you can put it in terms of where you can and can't go and what you can do quickly, and have you thought about this instead of that kind of conversations. So I think that's critical that we in the engineering schools learn how to communicate to those business partners, because that's where your real value can come in. And then maybe that's part of a master's program or a PhD program or beyond, but I think it's critical. Those conversations, to make things magic, you've got to be able to speak each other's language at some level to move forward. So.
I'd like to thank Andy, and some folks probably don't know this, but the reason you're actually here in this room is because of Andy. About 10 years ago, we started a CIO community practice. And Andy's been part of that and his folks for a long time. And that was part of the whole genesis of the Institute, is what do executives do, and what does that mean, and what does that mean to graduate programs? And then what does that mean to undergraduate programs?
Yeah, I think this is awesome.
And so it's just coming right out of that. And the thing you said is you hope you have an impact. I'm not sure, Andy, but I think you've had an impact.
Well, I hope so.
And it's about, the other thing he said is about world-changing solutions. And what's the Institute about? It's about helping us figure out how to deliver world-changing solutions,
Yeah.
right? So having that, that's what we're here for. That was
That's
a great
awesome.
message.
Well,
and so
thanks.
thank you very much for your time
Oh,
and
my
your
pleasure.
wisdom.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.